also today, on3.com, Shannon Terry had a story or a tweet that said something to the effect that everything is leveling off in the NIL. That it is, we've discussed this before. Would it ever level off? In fact, remember the Tulane director of athletics discussing that about a week or two ago, that it was starting to level off and that some of the collectives are not getting the same kind of money that they got when they were receiving when it was kind of fresh and exciting.
Well, I do think that, after a couple of years or, really a full year of this and collectives being there, you're also having to raise money. And if I'm a university donor or somebody and people come to me all the time asking for money because I've got a lot of it, if I say, okay, I'm asking Craig for $1 million, and Craig's like, what's the $1 million for? I'm like, well, we need to do some improvements to the arena. I can see the improvements to the arena. I can see that they put in new seats. I can see that, there are, improved concessions or whatever. So that is tangible. NIL is not tangible. And people who, for the most part, I know this isn't completely 100% bulletproof, but for the most part, people who have money often wonder exactly where that's going to go and how it's going to pay off for them. And if you're saying, well, we are doing this to make sure that we get this kid here to play quarterback, and he'll like, oh, that'd be great. Okay. But is he good? Well, everybody says he is. Yeah, but how do I know? What if he tears his knee? Am I out $1 million? You're like, yeah, you're probably still going to be out $1 million. For me, I'd rather buy new toilets in the stadium than give it to somewhere because that's tangible. So I do think that they that stuff has balanced out, and I think the Jaden Rashada situation might have been a flashpoint for a lot of people in similar situations of, well, we can't promise we can't pay, and maybe this needs to change.
Yeah, I mean, that was long predicted that eventually everybody would kind of wake up from the absolute dream fever or fever dream that they were in when they realized, oh, wow, we can pay guys on, the surface and not have to hide it in lockers after games or $100 handshakes or whatever. Like, wow, we can just do this all in the open and we just got to do it under a collective. Okay. But then money starts to get thrown around and then, all of a sudden you realize there's a Jaden Rashada situation or, the guy that you paid for is not quite what you thought he was going to be, or it sets a bad precedent, and all of a sudden now you're, got word spreading around that, hey, this school's giving out $10K, blah, blah, so now every time you talk to a recruit, probably you're hearing, that they've talked to other recruits and word's gotten out, and now that's something you got to deal with constantly, and I'm sure there's all sorts of things we're not even thinking of that have become problematic because of this issue, and not everything necessarily – major and, oh my gosh, this is the end of college football and anything like that. But just, things pop up that are unforeseen or things pop up that are maybe bigger deals than you thought that they might be. And there's probably some things that are lesser deals. But ultimately, there's just a lot of chaos, a lot of freaking chaos going on when this first kind of got underway. And, all due respect, you see some of these sites, and On3 is one of them, like their valuations. I know a lot goes into that, but there's certain ones you're just like, huh? Like, that dude's worth that? Like, how? How is that even possible? And so I think everybody was, we're dealing with what information we had, also dealing with trying to fill in the blanks with what we didn't have. And some of that's just naturally going to be incorrect to some degree. And so everybody's got a better idea a couple years in of kind of what the room looks like, what is normal, what is a realistic expectation, and what is just flat out like, you read Twitter too much when it comes to NIL and all of this. So I think that's a good thing that it's all that it's starting to settle. And look, ultimately it'll work because those who are deserving and who are the big brands themselves and the big brands that want to pay those athlete brands, I mean, that's still all going to happen. But some of this just kind of, let's load up and everybody gets a certain, I think some of that's going to start to dissipate, but that will be good for all involved.
I think that there's a couple of things, NIL, and I want to get to the tweet from Shannon Terry after I say this. I think just like coaches who all of a sudden are interested in jobs or their names come up or they're targeted, agents floating that out as well just to help their client where they are right now or to get something better. Here's Shannon Terry from On3.com, and they do a great job. A lot of places do now about the NIL and the values of certain players. But let's read this one. With NIL euphoria easing and our data being more available, we are entering a phase where collectives are raising and deploying far less money than they originally planned. Roster values will be impacted in 23, and a more efficient marketplace is starting to take shape. Now, some collectives are probably raising as much as they thought they would or more. But in this particular case, one of the responses, I just want to read the response. It was only a matter of time. We're starting to see collectives getting smarter with some of the tools available to create passive revenue streams and a renewed interest in local regional businesses. ROI will be the key for engagement.
Yes. Yeah, you got to have return on investment. Like I said before, you have to have return on investment. And, it is worth it to me if I'm a regional chain of, Raising Cane's was the thing that came into my mind, where they've got a couple of NIL deals with guys and they kind of focus them in the region. If I'm and that's a national company now, but if I was, the one level below that where, I've got 30 restaurants in Georgia and that's my thing, then Stetson Bennett makes a lot of sense to me. More people like Stetson Bennett. They'll enjoy watching Stetson. They'll think it's cool that Stetson Bennett's doing something with me, as opposed to, some of the other stuff that they're doing. So that makes sense. But and the other thing is, I think it is the ROI will burn the guys who are like, well, I'm not setting foot here for less than this much. And there's going to be plenty of schools that go, fine, we don't need you that bad. And then, those numbers start to come down to earth, because, again, if you're 17 and you have not proven it at the level yet, like, you might get a little something to get there to sweeten the pot, but ultimately you're going to have to earn it. And that's the way that most things work in the business world.
Now, should I add that, who you're originally taking this from, Shannon Terry, also said in basically the same breath that NIL has been a massive business boon for them, and so they're further expanding NIL coverage. So what was his exact quote?
Isn't that interest, though? Because
that's interest. It's been such a monster success.
Yeah.
We're expanding into full coverage around the business of college sports, veteran business reporters, NIL coverage, media rights, transactions, brands. I'm so tired of hearing the word brands. Like, I'm so tired of certain buzzwords, and that's one of them.
Brands.
That's definitely one of them. But I mean, not to take away from the message there, I think so there's definitely interest, but I do think that they, in general with NIL as well, I wonder how many people realized, while in that vein it may be exceptionally popular, but just how many people realize, like, how many people don't care either about the NIL aspect of everything. Like, that's an interesting message for a certain segment of college football fans. That's an eye roll from another segment of college football fans, because the whole Jaden Rashada thing, to me, like, it was interesting, but when we started getting, like, in the weeds about it, I was like, I don't care. I do not care about this 18-year-old kid and what is being offered. I mean, it's interesting to a point, but after a while, it's just like, give me some free agency rules. This is ridiculous. This is a clown show. And that's what it turned into, and it turned into a big old embarrassment for Florida, and it's not one that they can't recover from. But, while it'll settle in and become more professional and more streamlined and definitely more about the guys who actually do pull eyeballs, or guys and girls that do pull eyeballs and pull the big brands, hopefully that does put a lot of the other kind of circusy stuff to the wayside, because I do think that as much as that may add in certain areas, it also detracts, I think, from other people's enjoyment as well, and to my enjoyment to a certain degree.
Katie Rader,